Wander Wealthy Podcast, episode 154 with Margo Carroll. Hello, babes. Welcome back to another episode of the Wander Wealthy Podcast. My name is Tess. I'm the host, and today we are joined by Margo Carroll, who is an empathy marketing strategist and email funnel copywriter for sustainable brands and online business owners. I'm super stoked to have Margo on the show today. I asked her so many questions that specifically I had questions about, but also that I think you guys are going to find really useful. Margo is such a wise, brilliant marketer and consultant for those who need help in their marketing. We talked about so many wonderful things, specifically referrals and how to make referrals and collecting feedback from your clients or your customers way more easily or easier by automating them. We also talked about whether webinars are still relevant, and Margo shared her money story, the idea of being able to be generous while also still making money and making a good income from your business. And you're also going to learn that Margo once lived in a tiny house. So this is a super fun episode, jam-packed with amazing content, and I can't wait for you all to tune in. So here is episode number 154 with Margo Carroll. Margo, welcome to the Wander Wealthy Podcast. I am so glad that we get to connect here today, and going into the new year too. I have so many juicy questions to ask you about marketing, email, copy, sales funnel, all those good things. But first, I just want you to tell us how you're doing today. Where are you calling from? People don't know where you live, which is a really cool place. And introduce yourself in your favorite way.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for hosting me. I'm so excited to be here and talk to all of your Wander Wealthy babes on the podcast today. So I'm actually calling in from a small island north of Seattle, Washington, in the United States. So it's the Pacific Northwest. I'm looking out my window. It's a little bit gray and rainy, but gorgeous. I'm able to see the water from where I'm at, and it's a really beautiful area. So I love where I live.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So what I do, I help purpose-driven business owners get past those first six figures and beyond with a reliable sales system. And that typically means sales funnels, potentially evergreen webinars. And some of it also comes down to brand voice and giving them brand guidance. And a lot of that comes back to in-depth customer research that's based in empathy. So that's what I do, and that's what I'm known for.
Ooh, so cool. I want to dive into the empathy part. That's something that I haven't heard other, people who teach marketing talk about really. So how can you explain that a little bit more and how we can utilize that in our marketing and messaging with our customers?
Absolutely. So empathy-driven marketing is really a big part of what I feel like my legacy is in this online business world. So empathy really comes back to understanding how to listen first to your customers, and use that detailed strategic data that you gather from the listening, which I know that some of us are averse to things like spreadsheets and data sometimes. But if we're going to really, truly be empathetic, we also need to track the conversations that we're having. So doing a good job of being empathetic means listening well to your customer base as you build and grow your business, keeping your ear to the ground, and using what I call the forward thinking feedback framework. And really what that means is continuing to monitor what your audience needs from you, so that you make sure that the offers that you design, the way that you update a product when it's time to actually update it, or a service, is built with their needs in mind, instead of just what's more convenient for you or what increases your profit margin. Sometimes the things that don't scale at all are what makes sense, especially in the earlier stages of building the momentum and word of mouth around a particular product or service offering. Sometimes the things that don't scale, but that your customers want so badly that you are going to get rave reviews the second you start doing it, are the best things that you could possibly do for your business to grow that particular part of your product suite.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is really hard for people to do, because I feel like what you can be alluding to is like doing more one-on-one coaching before you build out like a group program or even an evergreen course. Am I spot on with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And with our clients, what we end up doing, so we work with people either one-on-one and we do this for them and build out their sales funnel, or we work with people in the group program. But we recommend that people are getting on the phone with people, which Tess, I know that you and I actually initially met when you were doing something similar to this, where you were
Yeah.
trying to get a better pulse on what was going on with your audience. And because this is what I preach and promote, I was like, heck yeah, I'll get on a call with you. Like, good for you for, staying up to date on what your audience needs when it's not a sales conversation. When I talk to people about how often they're talking to their audience, they'll usually tell me a lot, and I'll ask them, well, when are you talking to them when it doesn't relate to your product or your service? When it's not a sales conversation, when it's not a coaching call, it's not a customer. This is just someone that you're trying to learn more about the journey that they're on and what's leading them to find someone like you as a resource in the first place. And that's when I typically hear crickets,
Mm-hmm.
because they know how to send out like kind of your cliche end of year email survey that says, what kind of blog posts or podcast episodes do you want to see from me next year? And there's nothing wrong with those, but that's not the same thing as walking into interviews. So, just a casual phone call or Zoom call, and in-depth surveys that are designed to really get someone to talk about their journey and what they're going through and what the empty space is in their life or the job that they need to hire someone or something to solve for them. Once you get people to start sharing about their story, I was on a interview yesterday with one of my clients' customers. I was recording an interview with her so that we can use that interview to then build out the funnel for my customer,
Mm-hmm.
my client. And this woman started sharing so much of her story. She was crying, Tess. She was crying, telling me how much of an impact my client's program had had on her, and that it's going to impact her and her children, and that she's going to pass it on to her children. And she thinks that they will pass the knowledge on to their children. And it's changed her whole life. And those are the kinds of things that you don't get from kind of your cursory, give me feedback on how I did type of interaction with your audience.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is great, but I also think it's really hard for people to ask for feedback. Do you find that I mean, that happens a lot, but there's so much that you can learn from even opening up that conversation, opening up your, I guess, vulnerability to be receptive to feedback.
I think that the more that we can look at the pieces of our business that are challenging for us and that bring up a scarcity mindset, and I'm going to get a tiny bit woo here, but
Mm-hmm.
the things that we feel just a total resistance or inertia to, the more that we can systematize those things, and I don't mean detach ourselves from them, but systematize them so that we don't have to feel in the mood when it happens. We don't have to feel like we're up for it or like we're excited about asking for feedback when it happens, because we've created a system in our business that just makes that part of the process. So that applies to things like asking for feedback. I also always recommend that people are systematizing their referral process. So if referrals and word of mouth is a part of your business, which I don't care how digital and online you get, referrals matter, whether that's somebody tagging you in their IG stories and talking about how great your program is, or whether it's someone directly sending an email saying, hey, I want to introduce you to Tess. She changed my life. I think you should totally work with her too. Referrals are an important part of your business, and requesting referrals is another one of those things that people can feel that internal inertia. Like, is it okay? Am I good enough? They feel that imposter syndrome. And so they tend to put it off, or, they've already offboarded a client and they're done working with them. And then they're like, oh man, now's an awkward time to ask for referrals. So
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend that that's systematized and it's part of the process, typically midway through working with a client, whether that is in a course or in a coaching setting, systematizing referrals and then systematizing gathering feedback as well, both partway through a program or a coaching relationship or project, as well as at the end of the relationship. And that really, Tess, makes such a big difference, because then our emotions don't have to be on board with doing it.
Yeah.
It's just a part of what our business is set up to do. And then if it happens to be a day that that particular system is running and those requests are going out and we're checking in on it and we're excited about it, great. But if we're checking in on it and we're not feeling excited about it, that doesn't necessarily matter because we've set up a system that makes sure it happens whether we're feeling up for it or not.
I think that's brilliant because, I mean, even with me in my coaching, I still am manually sending requests for feedback and testimonials and whatnot. And sometimes you just get caught up and then literally it's like, okay, we haven't talked for a couple of months and I try to check in on my clients, but then it's like, and it's been a while. Do you want to give me a testimonial?
Exactly. And it's human, right? Like the things that are typically top of mind are the things that we're feeling excited about and that we're feeling energized about. And then we realize, oh, this time has gone by. It's kind of a strange time to ask for either a testimonial or referral or both sometimes. But it's like, just to like peek behind the curtain here, essentially my process. So like if anybody that's listening right now is one of my clients, they'll recognize this, but like halfway through a client relationship, which is typically like after we've done the research findings presentation and they know like what came up in the customer research, or halfway through one of my courses, they'll get just a message from me, and I customize it, like I personalize it, but it's built off of a template, and it basically says, I want to build a strong business based off of referrals, and I'd love to make it easy for you at the end of our relationship, assuming everything goes well, to send 2 or 3 people my way. Does that sound good to you? And that's literally all it is, but it's setting up the framework where they know that that's going to be coming, like it's future pacing for them.
Yeah.
And then I also in my course send out feedback form where it's not asking for a testimonial in any way. It's literally just asking, how are things going for you? Anything that we can support you with better. But it does let them know that they're going to get another one at the end of the program that's going to ask them for more detailed feedback. And so that preps it. And then at the end of a client relationship, when we ask for feedback, then it'll ask them, who are 2 or 3 people that you can introduce me to via email that would benefit from this type of work. And then I do the same thing with the course. So it's literally built into the feedback form where I don't have to do this awkward like shuffle of like, so, on the last Zoom call or something like, so could I also ask this question? And then I have it set up in my business where when that Google form or when that type form gets a new entry, then my assistant goes in and she follows up. So like if someone says, yes, I'd love to record a video testimonial in addition to this written testimonial, I don't have to do that follow up emailing every couple of weeks, reminding the person like, hey, you said you could do this, or could you actually do it? Where that kind of emotional piece can mess with that, or just, it's busy work for me, then my assistant takes it from there. So now you guys know all my secrets behind the curtain of how I have that systematized. So you can copy exactly what I do.
Thank you. Do you offer anything to past clients for referrals to give them an incentive, or is it purely just, spreading the good word?
This is a great question. So previously I never have. It's always just been kind of this mutual reciprocity where they know I don't work with people that I don't believe in what they do. I get more people asking to work with me than I say yes to. And so the people that I work with are really good at what they do. And so typically it turns into this mutual reciprocity where I'm referring people to them, and they end up referring people to me if they believe in the work that I do, and it would help some of them that they know. However, in 2020, for the first time, I'm actually going to be doing like a thank you, essentially like a monetary thank you, because money's nice. People appreciate that kind of recognition. Yeah. So I'm going to be doing a gift to anyone that sends a client my way that actually books a funnel build intensive with me. They'll get a nice little treat in their PayPal account.
Cool. I like it. And one question kind of spiraling off that, because referrals is something that I've not done a lot of. I've definitely not pushed it. I have a lot of clients who say, oh my gosh, I referred you. And I'm always excited that they're open to talking about it. And so this is more of a question for people who are coaches or service providers in more, I guess, like vulnerable industries. So for me, a lot of people aren't openly talking about, I'm working with someone on my finances. And it's hard for me to get my clients to like post about that on social media, right? Although some do, and it's amazing. And I think there shouldn't be any shame in it. But we have all those other coaching industries like life coaching, even like health and fitness or weight loss coaching, or even relationship coaching, where you're not so open about like, yeah, I'm working with this amazing relationship coach and let me refer you to her. Any different type of verbiage or messaging that you maybe work with your clients for them and their industry, especially those more sensitive niches, I suppose?
And you're talking more about getting referrals, or you're talking about like the customer research process? I think you're talking
I'd say
specifically
referrals. Yeah.
So with referrals, I honestly think that when you're in one of those more sensitive industries, setting it up to where it's easy for someone to do an email introduction for you, it might sound old school, but basically it's like getting asked on a date or a first date with someone that you met on the internet. You're not just going to like set up the date and show up, right? This is 2020. You're going to go check them out online, right? Like you're going to go find where is their digital footprint. You're going to Google their name. You're going to look them up on social media. And so even though social media might be where you're spending more of your marketing hours, the benefit of having somebody do an email introduction is huge, because then they get that personal access to you. But they're also going to be out there listening to your podcast and looking at your Instagram and looking at your Facebook. So I would say that it's a hugely untapped area that people, honestly, if somebody listening right now goes and starts leveraging the system that I just explained of setting up a systematized referral process, you're going to beat all your competitors, especially if you're the only one doing that in your industry, because all your competitors are so focused on social media that they're neglecting setting up a referral process that's more based on that personal, intimate, like I said, not very scalable initially, but it's based on that intimate connection via email.
Yeah.
And then they're going to go out and they're going to find your digital footprint elsewhere. And that's essentially building that trust that they're going to need to then go back to that email that they were CC'd on and say, hey, I'm taking this first step. I took a big deep breath and I hit send. So let's schedule a call.
Yeah. I think that's really genius. And it's funny because I do something very similar when, I have some people that I've worked with in the past and now they're coming to me for like a reference letter or something. I'm like, send me an email, type it up as if I was writing it. I will review it. I'll edit it if, I think it needs to be edited. But like you need to make everything easier for the person that you are asking the favor from. And if you can do that and make it super seamless for them to just take it and send it, and like, here's all the details you need, here's how you can find the person so you can stalk them online, like then it's going to be so much easier too for them to take that and send it to their friends. And if there's an incentive, that's even better.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Making it as frictionless as you can. And then the same thing goes not just for referrals, but also for testimonials. And then when we do customer research, like literally making it one click and they get to participate. And also, when it comes to customer research, we also recommend incentivizing just to make it easier for someone to say yes to spending 15 minutes of their life filling out your survey, or 20 minutes of their life getting on the phone with you to answer a few questions. That time that they're spending is invaluable to you, because you're going to be building an entire bank of copy and verbiage and ideas and deepest desires of your ideal client that you can use for years into the future of your business. So when somebody tells me like, oh, I don't know if I want to like offer a, $100 Everlane gift card to people that do an interview with me, I'm like, well, how much is it worth to you to have a sales page that converts? How much money is that worth to you? Because that's what you need to factor in when you're, offering people something in exchange for their time. So
yeah, absolutely. It's totally worth it. I used to be so cheap, especially in my business, because I've always had this idea of building it very lean, and I still do that very much so, but the willingness to even just like spend money on things that are going to make my life easier, it's so much higher now. And I can see the value now. And so if you've never done customer research and you like it's understandable that you would be, questioning and doubtful of whether it's really valuable, but it really is. And it gives you the words that your clients and your customers use. And so that's gold.
Mm-hmm.
That can help you print more money.
Yeah, exactly. I tell people, like, what do you want to spend? Do you want to spend your time or do you want to spend your money? Like sometimes if you don't want to spend 6 to 12 months of your life trying something that's not working simply because you're using the wrong words to try to reach the people that you want to reach, sometimes it makes sense to use some of your money, whether that's, incentivizing people to get onto calls with you or to do your survey, or hiring somebody to help you with it or taking the course or whatever it is for your business. Like spending money and spending time aren't mutually exclusive, but sometimes spending one will save you the other, right? So like if you are willing to spend a little bit of money, you're going to save some of those days and weeks and months of your life working on it or trying to work on it and then still hiring somebody in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. A follow-up question to that. What is your best advice for someone who is interested in hiring and spending some money to work with a copywriter, someone who's going to help build out their sales funnels? What should they be looking for when looking for someone to work with? Because I think that is really important when you're like letting someone kind of take over your voice in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, I would say that you need to look at a couple of things. You need to look at your budget. So you need to know your numbers ahead of time. I know if you're listening to Tess's podcast that matters to you, right? Like everybody here is wanting to be as responsible as they can with their finances. So not just taking the time out of, someone else's business to schedule, 5 sales calls with copywriters to get a quote unquote idea of a price range. You should know what your range is ahead of time. Like have an idea of what your budget is for a project. Just like you wouldn't go into running Facebook ads for a launch saying, well, I don't know, I'll spend somewhere between $200 and like $50,000. I don't really know. Like you wouldn't go into that way. You'd have a budget for it, right? So in the same way, having a budget for what a particular project is before you go to find someone. The other thing that I would say is this is something that I recommend for people anytime they're making their first hire in their business or their first couple of hires, is not trying to start a long-term relationship with any subcontractor, including copywriters, thinking like, oh, I'm going to build my team. And like, it's so popular to build a team right now. I want my dream team. But thinking of it as one particular problem that you want help solving and that you're going to track the results from. So what is the bottleneck in your business? Is it that you need a sales funnel? You have this amazing program. You've had a couple people go through it. Let's say you've had like 15 people go through the beta version and you're ready to do a full scale launch, but you're focused on building out the product and making it as best as it can be. You need someone else to actually design the sales funnel and tell you what the outline should be for the webinar before you record it and tell you exactly, what emails need to happen when, write them all out and plug them into your email marketing system. Is that the bottleneck? It might not be for you and your business. Maybe you have a background in digital marketing and you actually want to do all of the funnel design, and you'd rather have somebody else do the product improvements. Maybe, but whatever the bottleneck is for you, then you need to find someone who is a technician, so specialist, to hire for that thing. I don't recommend that you look for someone who is a generalist copywriter. I recommend that you look for someone who specializes in the specific type of project that you need help with. So for example, like in my case, I'm doing more like strategic big picture work with a little bit of copywriting thrown in now. But when I was just doing copywriting, I was known for email copywriting, and evergreen webinars and sales funnels. That's still what I do now, but I do a lot more of the strategic brand guidance. And then I also do some of the copywriting, but I also have some junior copywriters that I work with that are subcontractors under me. But if you need website copy, don't come to me, right? Like I did website copy in my early days, and I'll do, some minor little updates for clients that are on retainer with me. But overall, that's not what I do. So if you need a website, look for somebody that does websites. The other thing is word of mouth, like referrals. If you can get a referral for someone, that's your best bet. is to gather referrals. And again, going into calls with people, having an idea of being able to answer their questions. So a good copywriter is going to ask you, what's your timeline? Who's gone through this offer? What's the price point? What was your conversion rate the last time that you launched it? What's your budget? All of those questions you should be prepared to answer if you're scheduling time to go talk with someone. What I've noticed in the last 6 to 12 months is a lot of people use Instagram, and Tess, you might be experiencing this too, and they'll reach out to you for your services with no clue like what that actually entails. And they'll want to, get on a consult call with you thinking that it's just a consult call and not having any idea that it's going to be a high 4-figure or 5-figure investment to do some type of package with you. So making sure that you understand what your numbers are and what your desires are for the project before you reach out to people. And there's probably 10 other things I could list, but those are the first ones that I would say you need to have ready.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you very much for sharing that. There's one last thing that I'm super curious about in terms of sales funnels specifically, and that is or are webinars. And I know that you do evergreen webinars. You teach your clients how to set up their own evergreen webinars to scale. What is the future of webinars in 2020? Are they burnt out or are they still chugging along?
This is such a great question. So I think a lot of people feel overly inundated by webinars, which is understandable. I think that we live in a little bit of a bubble, especially if you spend a lot of time in the B2B or business to business online space. Webinars historically have been primarily used for business to business marketing and not for business to customer consumer marketing as much. And so what you've seen in the last 10 to 15 years is this advent of people of all stripes that run their businesses online, because now that's more than just the big software corporations, right? Like I could have a cell phone and start a business online from my spare bedroom. What you're seeing is a lot of people are using this tool that has worked historically for larger businesses and trying to adapt it to their own context. What I would say is that I think that the webinar as we used to know it 10 years ago is dead. Just like blogging as we used to know it 10 years ago is dead. Like, remember when you had the RSS feed? Tell me I'm not the only one, Tess. You had the RSS feed, right? And like Google would send an update every time there was a new blog post, and people were blogging every day about what they ate that day and what they did over the weekend. And now it's much different, right? Like the evergreen content that people are putting out that's valuable, that's going to stand the test of time on a blog is more important than churning out a bunch of soundbite content every single day. And just in the same way that that style of blogging is dead, webinars as we used to know them that are a very hard sell sales pitch are dead. Because the webinar of the future isn't even called a webinar. Most people are going to be turned off by the word webinar. So when I'm designing webinars for my clients, we're typically using words like workshop or on-demand class, or even lunch and learn. Because if you want to reach a high level client and they see the word webinar, the first thought that they have is, I don't have time to spare to put an hour of my time into finding out if I want to work with this person or not, right? Like they want to know. And that's why, again, word of mouth referrals are so important if you want to work with high end clients. But they want to know quickly if you're going to be worth their time. So even doing a lunch and learn where it's a 20 to 30 minute presentation, whether live or evergreen, where people can get indoctrinated, get educated, get comfortable and familiar with your brand. And then there still can be a pitch of getting onto a discovery call with you, or getting onto a consult call with you afterwards, or applying for more information about working with you. So they're still applicable in 2020. I don't think that they're going away completely anytime soon, but just like we now have voice text, and 15 years ago, we just started texting, or actually, I think it might even be less than 15 years ago, we just started texting. They're going to evolve and adapt over time. And I do get clients that come to me that are just, they have a personal resistance against webinars and they just don't want to use them. But then we go and do the research and find out that their audience will respond to seeing them on video. And so what I talk them through is like, if I want to get you from here, from the island that I live on, to Seattle, like I could put you on the back of a bike, get into a canoe, row the canoe to shore from the island. Then I could ride the bike and I could like tow you all the way to Seattle. That would get you there. Just like just an email sequence alone could make you some sales. But if I have a car and a speedboat that will get you there faster, I would be a little bit unethical if I didn't at least offer you the car and the speedboat and show you that option. And the webinar style of teaching and brand awareness is the car and the speedboat, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so you had mentioned the like hard sale, which is part of kind of the webinar of the past. And now you're going more into like application to work, consult call. Does that seem more of that, I guess, new age webinar of not hard selling right on the call because that's what people are expecting, and it's more easing them into your brand and in order to sell, for instance, something that's like higher ticket?
Right. Yeah. So as you know, like empathy is like a huge part of the work that I do, and empathizing with your customer base and what works for one customer base isn't going to work the same for another. So we always want to go back to the data and how people want to interact with us and our brand is how we should design that customer experience. But I'm not saying that you should not sell on a webinar. I have clients that have a $2,000 offer and they offer it on the webinar and they're converting at, anywhere between 3 and 14%, which on that top end, that's pretty wild to convert at 14% on an evergreen ongoing basis and not during a launch. But what my clients are typically doing is not your old school product launch formula method where it's like, you cannot access this program or this offer outside of this webinar, and this is your last and only final chance, or you'll miss out forever and ever the end. There's typically still an opportunity for people to apply or to purchase whatever the offer is, even outside of the webinar. The webinar is simply a way to indoctrinate them more on the brand and give them information. And then typically we'll still offer them some type of like thank you for sitting through the webinar. Where if they buy the thing from the webinar, or if they book the call from the webinar or apply from the webinar, they're going to get some kind of extra special thank you gift saying, hey, you spent a half an hour of your time or an hour of your time. We really appreciate you. Like, here's some bonuses. So in that way, it does sound a little bit more like maybe webinars, like B2B webinars that you've been on in the past. But I don't like it when my clients gate, like they keep the entire program behind the gate of this webinar, because we want to empathize with the fact that somebody might need to apply to work with them at midnight on a Thursday and not want to go sit through a webinar. So having access to it outside of that, so that we're really empathizing with where the customer's at on the journey.
Great. Margo, thank you so much for sharing all of these wonderful tips. I really appreciate you coming on and being willing to talk openly and share all of your wise knowledge. We're going to start talking about money now, since this is a money podcast. Mm-hmm. So going back to your story, I know you had shared about your business. Now I'd love to know a little bit more about your money story. Meaning, how did you grow up around money, and what has your business taught you about money? How has maybe, if it has changed, how has it changed your mindset around or your relationship with money?
Yeah, it's changed so many things about the way that I view money. So the way that I grew up was very much like blue collar, working class households. Work hard for what you can get and find the best job that you can, support your family, and more of a negative connotation around anyone that had a more free flowing and abundant relationship with money. Like, oh, they must have done something either unethical or concerning, maybe not unethical, but there's something concerning about somebody that has that much money. And I think that wasn't ever explicitly said to me, but it was definitely a generosity was like the big core value in my house, which was awesome. Like my parents did a great job of instilling generosity in us. And so there was always a skepticism around anyone that had an abundance of material wealth, because it was always the question of like, well, are they being generous though at the same time? Like, are they just hoarding everything for themselves? Which is always a good question to ask yourself, but maybe not necessarily something you want to like point the lens at someone else, like work on yourself first instead of just focusing on other people. So when I came into the professional world, my background is actually, I was originally a social worker. Like I did not work in marketing. So in the social work world, I would say that there's also maybe a negative mindset towards affluence, and I'm more concerned with like being generous first and then taking care of yourself after. And then I burnt out hardcore from the social work industry. Was working crazy long hours, loved helping the children that I was helping, but my body, my mental health, like my relationships couldn't sustain it anymore. And so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do to help people. And I got into the wellness industry and ended up helping people with their marketing, because a lot of wellness service providers are incredible at what they do, just like coaches, but they don't really know how to sell themselves. And I've always had this gift ever since I was small of connecting people. Like I'm a connector. So you have a problem, this person knows how to solve it. So me connecting you, that's not marketing. That's just human relationships and human behavior. And that's when I started to really rethink my relationship with money and started to really understand the nuts and bolts behind a business and what it takes to run. And that when you hear someone talk about their revenue numbers, their actual profit numbers and their take home, like the difference between gross and net is widely different. And across industries, that really varies as well. And right around that time, my husband was graduating from grad school and had a ton of student loan debt. He works in the medical field. And so there's just so much student loans. Like they don't allow you to work during grad school. So unless you have all that money saved up ahead of time, you're just walking away. It's just kind of accepted, right? Like everybody's walking away with like $100,000 in debt. And it's just insane when you say that out loud. But when you're around that crowd, that's just kind of how they just accept it. Yeah. And so we started this process of deciding what we wanted, like what is important to us, what's the priority to us. And so we started paying off a lot of student loan debt. I had originally kind of thought like, oh, he's going to have this great career and my husband's going to be the main income earner in our household, and I'll just kind of do this little side business on the side. And then my business started to grow and I saw, wait a minute, like this is really like I can really contribute to the future of myself and my family and my legacy here. And so that was really when like my business, as my relationship with money and the value of my work changed, and I started to understand and I could really articulate what was the financial value of the transformation I provided with my work, my revenue just like skyrocketed. Like it went through the roof. It was ridiculous. And it wasn't because I set like a certain income goal or put it on a vision board. It was because I started to understand the actual financial ROI on what I was providing for people.
Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of people can get hung up, especially, it's interesting because you had transitioned from your money story and doing social work to understanding the ROI of what you're providing for people. And a lot of, clients that I work with or hangups that I hear is like, I feel this pull to make an impact and to be so generous with my time and the gifts that I can give, and therefore not charge for it. Like I feel like I need to give it for free. And you really have to make that shift to see the value, but also like, you as essentially everyone's running at least two businesses. You have your business that earns the income, but then you also have your business pays the other business, which is the family business, the business of paying off the debt of the family, which is unfortunately these days more so the norm, especially early debt. Like, yeah, people get mortgages later on and have that for a long time, and that's a goal. But like we're all coming into family relationships now with debt. And that's a responsibility too. And I think people, forget that when they think that they need to be so generous and that their generosity can't show through providing value and even getting people to put skin in the game, essentially.
Oh, totally. And I think like for me, coming out of that industry and then moving into a for-profit business, I've found other ways too to be generous, where like I volunteer on the board of a nonprofit, and we can plan out like donations ahead of time, like, okay, this is how much we're bringing in, and then this is how much we can afford to donate, rather than this is the tiny salary that I'll take because I'm giving back to the world. And I think that my husband and I have this bizarre we're not very ordinary. We're always attracted to kind of this strangely radical way of getting from point A to point B. For example, I don't know if you've heard of tiny houses, but back like a year after we got married.
I'm obsessed.
Okay,
it's dangerous.
So a year after we got married. So we got married in 2011. A year after we got married, they were super fringe. There was no Netflix show. There was no, like, nobody knew what they were. And we had a very small amount at that point in time, a little bit of debt, and we loved traveling and love trying to live more sustainably. And so we're like, you know what? Let's just do this. Let's just buy a trailer and teach ourselves how to build a tiny house, and we'll save a bunch of money, and we'll get out of debt, and we'll travel the world, and we'll have really low housing costs, and it'll be awesome. And we did it. We designed it, and with the help of friends and then some professionals, like, we built it. If you go on my Instagram feed, you can see a picture of it. You can actually see pictures of us building it back in the day.
Oh my God, so I'm going to do that when we're done.
Yeah, do it. You're doing it right now. I know you are. So when we did that and we got completely out of debt, and our housing costs were like it was like $200 a month. It was ridiculous. And we were traveling abroad a couple times a year. And this was on a very piddly, like, social work salary at the time. So that gave us this like ridiculous kind of cocky belief that, like, if we can do that, we can do anything. And ever since then, we've kind of kept that ingrained in us that, like, we're not the victim of our situation. We can make choices, even if they're like kind of bizarre, strange to the rest of the world choices, to get us where we want to go, when it comes to everything in life, but definitely when it comes to money.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a money lesson for anyone. But even like in business, a lot of people believe, so this is like, you can hear this message, whether it's for personal finance or it's for business, and it's about like spending money. There's just the general like socially acceptable norm of how you're supposed to spend money. And then there's also the fact that you don't have to do any of that. And so a lot of people, especially when they're starting their business, think like, well, I need to hire the copywriter and hire the assistant and hire and hire and hire. And they forget the fact that, like, they're the business owner, and if they want to build this business and make a good salary from the business, you can't just spend all the money on the business. Like, there's a time and a place to do that, but it also has to make sense. And there's so many ways that you can get creative and, live, as long as you're willing to live life differently and do stuff a little bit different, you can create so much wiggle room for yourself to save a ton of money or pay off all of your debt, or, do both. And also, like, travel abroad 4 times a year on a social worker's salary.
And also the other thing I would say too, Tess, because I'm like ridiculously passionate about this thing. I feel like I have, in another life, I would be like working in the personal finance sector and empowering people there. But I honestly think that the biggest barrier to whatever your financial goal is, either for your own life or in your business, is your inability to ignore other people's perception of you. And as much as we all like to think that we're like a rebel and we like to do our own thing and we don't care what other people think, like, when it comes down to it, when you make the decision to start a business and you're like too shy to tell your friends and family because you think that they're going to make fun of you or tell you it's not safe or comfortable and you probably shouldn't do that, that's your inability to ignore and move past what other people think of you to do what you think is right for you and for your family and for your future. And it was just like, when we decided to build the tiny house, my dad was like, "Oh, so you guys are going to be homeless?" Because back then it wasn't a thing, right? Like, nobody knew what a tiny house was, right? It wasn't like, it was like, "Oh, are you going to buy like an RV and live in it down by the side of the river?" Like, nobody knew what we were talking about. And then like right now, this also relates to money, but we're in the process of buying a small scale farm, but we're doing it in a very unique way so that we can leverage finances in our favor. And it doesn't on paper it doesn't look like the average life. Like it's not like the hubby, the house, the 1.5 kids, and the Honda. But our ability to just not care what other people think. I mean, we do care, of course, because we're human, but not making that what determines our next steps in life is huge, because that's what's going to allow you to eventually leave the job that is just like crushing your soul. What's going to allow you to suck it up and live in the crappy apartment for a year while you pay off the debt so that you can buy the property for the dream home. It's what's going to allow you to build the business lean at the beginning, staying up late till 11 at night, because you know that in 6 months you've mapped it out and you'll be able to hire the assistant. But you have to start from a place of your own internal compass and knowing that it doesn't matter what other people think, as long as you're moving towards what's best for you and your family and your future.
Amen. Thank you for sharing that.
High five
okay.
from across the ocean.
Yes. One quick money question, one more quick money question, and then we got to wrap this up. And this is just a question I ask almost everyone, 99% of everybody that comes on the show. What is your current money plan? Meaning, how do you make money? What are you offering right now? What are you spending money on? And what are you saving for?
Such a good question. So I have 2 offers. In the past, I have had much more custom offerings. And now in 2020, there are only 2 ways that people can work with me. So one is funnel build intensives. And those are for people that are ready to have someone come in and take over the process of the customer research and building out the sales funnel for their next launch, promotion, or offer. So those range from $6,500 to $8,000, depending on if a person wants to do tech implementation with us or if they want to have their tech team do it. And then the other way that people can work with me is the Trailblazer Toolkit, which is my program to help people leverage both one-to-one programs or one-to-one packages and one-to-many programs for their business. So those are the 2 ways that I earn my money. And then the things that I'm saving for. So I am leveraged pretty heavy on expenses right now because I'm building for the future. So I, brought on a new assistant, brought on a graphic designer, really trying to focus on making an amazing customer experience for my community in 2020, but at the same time, still saving a healthy amount. So that's on the business side. And then on the personal side, I'm knocking on all the wood over here because nothing is finalized yet. But as I mentioned before, we're working on buying the property to develop our small eco farm that we're going to be building here in Washington State.
So cool. All right, we're going to go into the quick and dirty Q&A. These are just a couple fast-paced questions to wrap up the show. And number 1 is personal to you. How do you get to your island? Do you have to take a boat? Is it not connected by land at all? Or by even like a bridge?
It's a really, really long bridge. And then our island is, you can reach like 12 other islands via ferry. And we're so far north that like I can take a ferry from the island that I live on to Canada in like 45 minutes. So that's how far north we are. I'm very close to like Vancouver, BC, and Victoria on Vancouver Island.
Very cool. What is something that you do to step away from the business that is, very unique to you? It's your thing.
So I say that anything in my business is filling my brain cup, and I like to have hobbies that empty my brain cup. So they require like no thought, no new ideas. So it's a tie between 3 things. So one is crocheting. So I like to crochet and I try to knit, but I'm not very good at it, but it's so nice because I can just sit and mindlessly do it. And the other 2 are trail running and gardening. So all just like very in my body things that don't require a lot of thought from me, because when I'm not in my business or doing those things, I'm with 2 small kids under the age of 4 who I love dearly, but there's a lot of questions and a lot of why mommy and a lot of things I have to answer for both there and in my business. So I like to have hobbies that just don't require any thought.
Yes. Awesome. Your favorite account to follow on social media?
So this is an interesting question. I thought about this ahead of time. In the last 6 months, I have essentially done like a mental purge of like not consuming as much content, especially from quote unquote thought leaders. So this was hard for me to think of someone. But what I've actually been really inspired by lately is people that are kind of in the early to mid stage of their journey and they're just kind of starting to blow up, or pop, as I like to say, in popularity. And because I don't know about you, Tess, but for me, I find that they're like more honest about what they're actually doing in their business, because they're like, wow, I didn't realize that you guys appreciate me this much. Like, thank you for the accolades. This is what's actually going on. So the person that I love following right now is the content bug, and I think her name is Catherine. But she is starting to kind of blow up on YouTube right now, and it's really sweet to watch her journey.
Very nice. The best piece of money advice you've been told that you'd like to pass along?
That one's hard because I don't think that I've been given very good money advice. I think it just that what you think is possible is what's possible. That nobody told me that. That just came from me just right now, because that's been true in my life. Whenever I decided something wasn't possible for me financially, I wasn't able to do it. But once I decided it was possible, then the steps became clear.
Awesome. I like it. Margo, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been such a treat, and I've learned a ton, and I'm sure everyone else has learned a lot as well. Tell us where we can find you so we can come follow you, and even, some people might want to work with you on all the things you got going on.
Yeah. So you can find me. There's a workbook that I have. So if you want to learn more about the framework that I walk people through, I call it, I don't like to give people roadmaps, so I call it an anti-roadmap, but it's the Trailblazers anti-roadmap for online business success. And I'll give Tess the link where you can actually download that workbook and learn more about how I recommend you do that in your business. And then you can find me on Instagram at Margo Carroll. That's MargoCarroll. And I'm also at margocarroll.com.
Perfect. I will pop the link once you give that to me in the show notes and also in the outro of this episode. Margo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. So great to talk to you, Tess. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks everyone for listening.
And that's a wrap. Episode 154 with Margo Carroll. You know where to go to head to the show notes. You can click the link in the description or go to wanderwealthypodcast.com/podcast/episode 154. I'm going to be linking the Trailblazers Anti-Roadmap for online business success, the workbook that Margo mentioned at the end of this episode. I will link it in the show notes so you can get access to it right from there. It's just 2 clicks away. And don't forget, if you are listening to this episode or you already listened to it and you enjoyed it as much as I did, share it with someone who you think it will help. Or just go ahead and screenshot your podcast player and share it on Instagram. You can tag me at Tess_Wicks and Margo at Margo Carroll. That's 2 R's and 2 L's. And yeah, we'll most definitely be saying thank you and probably further sharing your share. So we love to give back. And Margo's been amazing. She is a connection I've actually made through Instagram. So Instagram is a lovely place and we both like to hang out there. All right, that is it for today's show. You guys know where to go if you want to work with me, if you are interested in furthering your personal finances, your business finances, or even your relationship with money. Head to wanderwealthy.com and go to the Work With Me tab. Pick the option that is appropriate for you, and you can fill out an application and sign up for a discovery call, and we will have an amazing conversation and get you all geared up for an abundant 2020. That's what we all want, right? All right, until next time, I hope you wander wealthy.